But for a lot of us, we have to go through that interview skill, that interview challenge, jump that hurdle. And it's not easy. It really isn't. So I'm going to be talking about some light communication issues, especially as it pertains to interview skills. Well, there's two main goals to an interview, depending upon what side you're on. Either you're with the company who is doing the interviewing, you're the interviewer, or as the interviewee. As you trying to hang your license at a particular salon or shop, you've got two main goals. Number one is to make yourself shine. It really is to put your best foot forward so they will feel comfortable with you and feel good about you as an employee for them. And then the second thing is to find out all the information that you can about that company, about that salon, about that spa. Because it goes two ways. It's not a one-way conversation. That's kind of an interrogation. And sometimes an interview may feel like an interrogation, but it's not. You need to find out more about them as they try to find out about you. So, it's two goals. One, put your best foot forward, you really shine. And then second, to find out more information on that organization. So how do you do that? You have to impart a certain amount of trust. But it's so hard to get to trust initially. There's really three steps to getting into trust. One is just likability. The second is building rapport. And then you kind of get into trust. First, likability. Does someone just like you? In other words, you're not obnoxious. You don't have bad habits. You're not going around talking real loud all the time. Because some people can find that a little irritating or obnoxious, and you're just not perceived as likable. And I bring that up because there was a lady earlier who asked a question about how do you deal with someone who just talks really loud and really shrill all the time. But that's those habits that we need to be mindful of. And then you get into rapport. Rapport is building a sense of familiarity. In other words, there's some common ground. I have something in common with you. You have something in common with me. What is it that we both share? So, a really good thing for you to find out for the person who's interviewing you, if they've been there for, say, 10 years, well, that's impressive. May I ask, what has kept you here so long? What is it that you like about your spa, the company that you're working with, that's kept you there so long? It's a great question to ask. And who knows? They may have the very same reason for getting into physical therapy or as a massage therapist as you. Okay? So, may I ask about your family business? Is it your parents, or is it a sibling, or
Daughter.
Okay, good, daughter, fantastic. And it's always nice to have that kinship there. So, who knows? Why did your daughter get into it initially? Okay, yeah, just to bring a sense of comfort to people. But for others, it may be because they thought the pay was going to be good, or they may open their own salon one day, or whatever. But if you find something that you have in common with them, spend some time talking about that before you actually get into the meat and potatoes of the interview questions themselves. So once you establish likability with someone, maybe you can go into rapport, then you can build on trust, which is where I believe in you, you believe in me, we've got each other's back. But it's very tough to establish trust the very first time you meet someone. But they want to trust that you're going to be a good employee, you're going to show up on time, you're going to treat the clients well, and that you're not going to give the company's name a black eye. Let me give you 4 pointers of things that you can talk about when you first meet someone for the very first time. Now, I'm a public speaker. I don't mind publicly speaking. Let me ask you this question first. Is anybody here a little leery of public speaking? There usually are several, yeah. Once upon a time, it used to be said that it was #1 fear for Americans was public speaking. me go the other way. Does anybody else have a fear of meeting one person for the first time? Usually in my seminars, I will find that it's about an equal number. There's a lot of people who feel really a little nervous about just meeting one person for the very first time. What do I do? What do I say? How do I interact with them? So here's 4 things that you can typically talk about that's pretty safe. Number 1, and it spells out form, F-O-R-M. Number 1 is family. People generally like to talk about their family. It's a safe question to ask. Do you have any kids? Where are you from? O stands for occupation. Occupation. And that's a good question to ask. Why did the interviewer first choose to get into massage therapy? How long have they been there, like we were talking about earlier? And then M is meaning. Meaning. And that's a little tricky one. Some people are a little guarded about that. But if you can talk about what creates passion in people's lives, what gives their lives meaning. A lot of times people, you can't get them to shut up. It's their grandkids or they're looking towards retirement or what their hopes and dreams are. But those are 4 general things that you can have just as light conversation when you first meet with the interviewer. Sometimes they may want to cut right to the chase and jump right into the interview. But a lot of times they want to slow down a little bit and kind of get to know you on a personal level. So those are 4 things that whomever your interviewer is, you can talk to them about. All right, you've got a list of some potential questions, and I'm not gonna. This is something that I compiled for I do a lot of career coaching, and this is something that I compiled for my clients about 3 years ago. I'm not going to read them all to you, but I really want you to be familiar with these because these are a lot of the typical generic questions that you will have in an interview. So rather than being hit with them cold, kind of be prepared to have an answer. And if you want to have a buddy ask you some of these questions, how would you respond? How would you respond? I will pick on a couple of questions in here. Here's an example of a kind of a bad question. Well, sometimes they may ask you, has any ever been on an interview and someone's asked you, what is your greatest strength? Anyone had that one before? Yeah. That's a common question, and it's a good question to ask. The problem is they'll go the other way. What do you think the next question is going to be? Exactly. What's your greatest weakness? Now, the pat answer to that is, my greatest weakness is, I just care too much. My greatest weakness is, I work so hard. This is the kind of stuff that they're looking for, and you're not really getting to know the person being interviewed at that point, but these are a lot of the questions that you'll have. Another really good question for an interview to ask you, why should we hire you? That's a great question to ask. And you need to have an answer. I don't know is not good. So if you see yourself fitting in with them, or maybe it's a place that you've heard that the owner is really good working with newer people to still kind of give a sense of that guidance and some training. Whatever it may be, share that with you. And then down here at the very bottom, I compiled this for some people in management, but some zingers that you might get. What is your favorite color and why? And I don't know if they're trying to psychoanalyze you in the investigation. In the interview, but it's not really a very good question. Another one, if you're an animal in the forest, what kind of animal would you be? Terrible question, but we still have a lot of people asking those because they think it's going to give some insight into what your personality is. So the appropriate answer is, I'm a lion. I'm a lion. Yeah. So you never want to say I'm a panda bear or I'm just kind of a snail or anything like that. So, I'm a lion. I'm really aggressive. I'm very passionate about what I do. Not a good question to ask, but there they are sometimes. All right, in terms of just general communication, and I had earlier, some people ask some questions specifically about this. There's 3 channels of communication. When you're talking to someone, there are the words you use, how you use the words, in other words, how you sound, and then it's what you look It's verbal, vocal, and visual. Verbal, vocal, and visual. So, verbal, what are the words that you are using? And maybe you have some sort of a crutch word that you just sort of say over and over and over again when you're nervous. It's like, so I think I really fit in here, I don't know, tell me. So be mindful of those things, the words that you say. Make sure that you're articulating your thoughts well. So verbal, vocal, is the tonality that you take. Are you really obnoxiously loud? You don't want to come across that way. And if you're talking to someone and they mention something to you and they may ask you, why are you wanting to get into physical therapy? And you kind of slow it down a little bit of hush. And you know what? I've seen so many people with a lot of pain. I just want to help. See, it's more believable. It's the way you talk, it's the tone that you choose, rather than here's the pat answer that I'm going to give you. And for visual is the third V. What you look like when you're talking. And I'm not picking on millennials, but I'm sorry, I have just heard this so many times that the interviewer will be asking questions, talking to the person, and they're on their cell phone in the interview. Not good. Not good. So you're saying all the right words. Yes. Oh, yeah, sure, I can do that. And you're checking your email. Not good. Not good. So you've got to make sure that the verbal, the vocal, and the visual are all together. All together. And still on the visual, two things I want to talk about. Make eye contact and smile. Smile. That's part of the visual. Really important to make eye contact. So, if you were to ask, what's your name, dear? Ashante. If you were going to ask me, okay, you're an interviewer, and I'm in your interview, and you're thinking about hiring me, what's a question that you might ask? I'm putting you on the spot here a bit. It's okay.
Can I ask one?
Sure, yeah.
Why should I hire you?
Why should you hire me? Because I'm a real people person, and I'm just really passionate about being around people. What's the visual cues that I'm giving you there? I'm telling you, I'm a people person. I feel passionate about being around people. But what is my body and my face and my gestures telling you? No, you're not. No, you're not. So we've got to be mindful of this, because a lot of times we're in an interview and we're so in our head because maybe we're a little nervous, and we're so in our head we're not cognizant of how we're projecting ourselves through our face and our body language. And we've got to keep all three together. So there was a study done back in the 60s for the three V's, verbal, vocal, and visual. And it just simply says that which one's most important? There's not one. They're all equally important, but they have to be together. Otherwise, you're going to send mixed signals. And if someone reads a mixed signal like you're saying something, but you don't really sound sincere, you're going to sow seeds of distrust and confusion. And it's going to be hard for them to understand. Eye contact is really important, and you've got to smile. You've got to smile. Well, Blaine, I don't have a good smile. Yes, you do. Get over it. You have a great smile, and you've got to give that, because that's how you tell people, I'm friendly. You have to say that. I had a friend of mine who was a trainer, just to relate a story, and she was flying into another city. She was going to talk to about 300 people in this large conference. And her plane was delayed. So she was getting there just a little bit late. Now, she wasn't going to miss her stage time, but she showed up to the conference center, and she just had maybe a few minutes. So what she did was she ran into the ladies' room just to kind of touch up herself, her makeup and everything. She had a lot of stuff set out on the counter, and she was just kind of, freshening up, touching up her makeup. And like most public speakers, just before, you're running through some of the major lines that you know you're going to say. And so she was doing that. She was running through major lines and everything. And then she looked up as she was conducting parts of her speech. She looked up at the mirror. She's like, oh my God, is that what my audience sees? Because it really struck her that every time she went on stage, she wasn't smiling. She just wasn't thinking about it. Because she was so in her head about what the information is that I need to impart and what it is that I'm going to say next, that she was concentrating. She forgot to smile. So, I think in a lot of instances, presentations may be more important than the information. A lot of people disagree with that, but no one's going to hear you unless they trust you and they know you and they like you. So those are just a few things to keep in mind